Okay, we're back. We're live. I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech, and we're talking about community matters with David and Thais Vogel. They're here in town, and they are co-founders of the VoLo Foundation, which is a private family foundation that exists to educate the public. We're going to do that now to create a sustainable and secure planet for generations to come. What's more is that this is an attempt to achieve positive change for the planet through data-driven research. And David is a data-driven scientist. I mean, he's a driven scientist who likes data. Did I get that right, David?
That's right.
Welcome to the show, David. Thais, welcome to the show. So you have some slides, and there's some things you want to impart, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk about VoLo Foundation, talk about its work, and talk about the climate change science and conclusions that we need to know. Okay?
Well, VoLo Foundation started in 2014 down in Florida. We live in Florida, but Dave was born in Hawaii. That's why we have so much interest in coming here and sharing our knowledge with you all. And I always say that people that know us, we're very different. Dave is a data scientist. He is the one that talks to that community. I'm more of the everyday mother of six that talks to the everyday people. So we become a bridge between the science and the everyday people.
That's perfect, perfect. That's the way you have to do it, right? Otherwise, there's too much distance between the science and everyday life. So the science is very interesting to me. You guys have a regular newsletter. You publish articles. You encourage others to write articles and do research on this. You are really getting more and more active in the area, and it requires that. Unfortunately, we are distracted in recent months with COVID, but you haven't stopped. I noticed that. You keep on going, and you keep on doing your work and publishing your findings. So, David, what have you been learning? What can you tell us today? What do your slides show about creating a sustainable and secure planet? It's really important. We can never forget it.
I think it's important for people to realize the connection between climate change and the effects on our economy. Because consistently, economy ranks #1 on the issues. Climate change ranks somewhere down there, depending on the group. But it's so closely tied to the economy. And we have to, and what we do is we draw the relationship between each ton of carbon we produce and the damage it creates, both economically and to our health. And so that's really what the research shows us. And I think if it can be presented correctly, there are certainly policies, many different policies that can work to prevent further change in the climate and change in our temperature.
Yeah, so policies, by policies, you're really talking about government policies, because that's where the leadership must come from. And today, I think we're going to focus on carbon policies and the benefits of carbon policies. And I'd like to hear your most current thinking about that. We have some states that are actually entertaining a carbon tax, and maybe there's other incentives you can tell us about. It's all about incentivizing the change of human conduct. That's the way we can save the planet. And it seems like if you look at it from an economic point of view, it's monetary policies, monetary incentives like a tax or a credit, whatever. So tell us your latest thinking.
Well, in order to stay non-partisan on this, we sort of present a spectrum of policies. So certainly there's the carbon tax, which you probably hear a lot about, but many object to an additional tax. There's also the idea of carbon fee, carbon dividends, where the polluters are charged a fee for every ton for basically the damage that's being done, and that money is given back to the public. So it's not an additional tax on households, but a tax on the actual polluters. Mm-hmm. And what that does economically, it actually patches an inefficiency in our economy where polluters can actually do more damage than the actual profits they produce. And if you can actually patch that efficiency, it makes that one carbon pricing policy can actually fix everything, because capitalism is very powerful. Once you price in the correct cost of carbon, then all of a sudden the clean energy becomes more competitive, and you don't have to do this and that with incentives and caps and all this regulation. So the free market can actually solve itself if you make it efficient.
Well, I know we're going to go through the slides, but a couple of things come to mind. Number one is a tax would be across the board. And that means a tax would be regressive on people who don't have a lot of money. These days, we're interested in what you would call it, social justice. That's a fundamental piece of all the movement around the country. And query, what do you say to the people who say, David, a carbon tax is regressive because it affects everybody the same way, and some people are better able to pay it than others? What do you say to them?
Well, I'd say there's a lot of adjustments that can be made. There's probably half a dozen policies that have been proposed, and some regressive, some more progressive. And that's really something for the politicians to work out to make it fair. And certainly we're in favor of something that is socially fair. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't actually matter where the exact economics of where the money is going, for example, is not actually important in solving climate change. It's actually just the fact that the pollution is charged is the whole in making the economy work. And just the fact that pollution is charged actually fixes the problem.
So you're creating a damage, Jay. I mean, you cannot go and destroy the house and not pay for it. The polluters, the big companies, are creating this damage that at the end of the day, we, the constituents, are paying for it, because every time that we have to recuperate from a damage, the hurricanes and the droughts and the California fires, we are paying out of our taxes.
Yes.
So people don't understand that they are already paying for it, instead of paying for a tax because they don't like the word tax. Let's charge the real polluters.
Well, yes, and it's only fair if you're looking for fairness, as David pointed out. You want to assign the burden to the people who have emitted most of the carbon. So it should be proportional to the amount of carbon that you are responsible for emitting. I'm sorry, David, you were saying?
Yeah. So basically, it's like I can't. Well, I'll give you a statistic that's pretty mind-blowing. If you look at just the last decade, the net profit of the oil and gas industry was $850 billion. The climate damages done was $1 trillion. We're actually at a point with emissions where the damages to the public exceeds the amount of economic gain. So it's a negative. And yet you don't subtract from GDP when there's damages done. So it looks like our GDP is growing, and yet people have less and less. And you ask why? That's why we're spending tax dollar monies for climate damages.
Yeah, there's huge numbers. How do you quantify the incentive or the disincentive, the tax, whatever mechanism you're going to use? That sounds like something for a data scientist, doesn't it?
There's actually many more scientists than I working on that very problem, and there are specialists working in different areas, quantifying storm damages, quantifying medical costs in different parts of the world, quantifying the cost of droughts. And so collectively, if you were to add up what all these specialists have come up with, it could be on the order of as much as $200 per ton of carbon.
Well, we need to change conduct. And I suppose the fringe benefit is this will give government some money to spend in ameliorating climate change on the other side of the question. So it's a win-win. as far as that's concerned. But, you know, it strikes me that if you want to create a sustainable and secure planet using carbon incentives, carbon policy, and the benefits, you have to do it on a global basis. You don't want to just limit it to one area, one country, even one continent. You want to go as far and wide as you possibly can. Am I right about that? Is that the way you guys address it?
You are correct. It does have to be global. And if you get into the details of some of these proposed policies, they have border adjustments. So
interesting.
First of all, if we want to be the best country in the world, we have to be the leaders. We have to start with pricing here, and other countries have already started with that leadership. So, for example, Sweden, many places in Europe already have price on carbon in the form of carbon tax. We don't have to do a carbon tax to price carbon, but we have to show leadership, and then create a border adjustment. So tax the imports if that country has not taxed carbon. So there are actually fixes to make this a global policy.
So one more question before we get to your slides. I do want you to present them, but strikes me that to get government to adopt policies, which is really the name of the game here, and policies that will work, you have to have their attention. You have to have government's attention. And the problem right now is we have a pandemic. And if you look at the news, you know, any paper in the world, the headline is going to have something to do with COVID-19. Mm-hmm. How do you get their attention in a world which is so focused and so distracted on COVID, when in fact this is as much an existential threat as COVID is, in my view, anyway.
I think I sent you an op-ed I did in Florida for Mother's Day, and even though it was focused more on what's going on in Florida, it said this is a dress rehearsal. The COVID, the pandemic, is a dress rehearsal for climate change or for the environmental crisis that we have. Until we realize that we have a broken relationship with nature, we're going to have more pandemics. We're going to have future and more often pandemics happening in the world. When people make the connection about climate change, health, and social, you're talking about the social racism and social problems right now, it's just a circle and it has to come together. So we have to make everybody understand that climate change is super tied to the pandemic. And now that we are learning from the COVID, the coronavirus didn't see race, didn't see color, didn't see the geographical location. Climate crisis is exactly the same. And it didn't come as fast and furious like the COVID-19, but little by little is killing us. So yes. Whether is that a health issue because of the air pollution and the Cleaner Act, in the government has to take care of their population.
I think it's
I'm afraid we're going to be reminded by the weather soon enough. We're almost, into hurricane season in the summer, and the weather will remind us exactly what we have to do here. It'll emphasize the priorities is what will happen. David, you were saying something.
Yeah, I think it's also a wake-up call too, not like what happens when we ignore science. I think Hawaii certainly did very well with COVID, very few people. So the person in Hawaii did very well in paying attention to the scientists, but in a lot of states we didn't. We sort of, while other countries were hunkering down and keeping the cases low and testing, we ended up with the most cases in the world, and that was from ignoring science. So I feel like this should be a wake-up call. We should not be ignoring scientists on climate change, where every single scientist agrees, at least 99%, that climate change is inevitable and it's going to be a much bigger effect than COVID. We're going to have parts of the country eventually disappearing.
It really is very frightening. And when you mix it all together, it's super frightening. So let's look at your slides. Why don't we put the first one up, and then you can explain it to us and tell us the track of your thinking.
Okay. So this slide here shows where the burden of storm damages are falling and how it's changing over time. You can see, and I'll draw your attention to the bars on the right. You can see that the gray in area is the percentage of climate damages being paid by insurance companies. So more and more insurance companies are pulling out of liabilities, and they're not covering. The coverage is falling on upon the U.S. taxpayers, and you see a bigger and bigger percentage being paid by taxpayers or uninsured losses. So that's the American public, and if you look at that middle graph, it shows that climate damages double or triple every single decade, the past several decades, as a result of climate change. So the American public is paying a higher percentage of a higher number. And so it's really, it just illustrates how it's hitting us in the wallet.
It keeps climbing. It makes Al Gore look old-fashioned. Why don't you go on with the next slide?
And this illustrates exactly how many dollars is coming out of the average American's wallet and so it's up to almost $1,000 per household per year. And keeping in mind that only half of American households actually pay taxes. If you're a taxpayer, that's $2,000 a year on average coming out of your taxes to pay for climate damages. So what used to be maybe $1 and $2 billion aid packages from the government on is now for storm damages. Now we see $50 billion storm aid being paid on a single storm. And that's coming out of your wallet. That's all that's all part of the carbon damages that the fossil fuel companies are not being charged for.
You know, you don't have to engage in predictive analysis, but it's clear from that chart, it's going to go up further, and it will continue to go up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, how about the next one?
And so the next one is a good illustration of how the damages compare to the actual fossil fuel company profits. So we think of profits as income coming into as money coming into the economy, going into the pockets of Americans. But you see in the last decade, the storm damages exceed the profits of the fossil fuel industry. So that's, like I mentioned in the beginning, that's negative income to the U.S.
We have more there. Okay.
And so I mentioned that if you were to add up all the damages from various experts, it would be something like $200 per ton. And so I just wanted to put that in terms of price per gallon. So you might go fill up your car with gas, and it may, I don't know what it is in Hawaii, maybe $4, $3 or $4 a gallon. But for every gallon you buy, there's an additional $2 of damage being done from the carbon emission.
Yeah, we don't think of that.
And so same with the electricity you use in your home. In Florida, we only pay 11 or 12 cents per kilowatt hour, but I think you're about triple that here in Hawaii. But for every kilowatt hour, if that energy is coming from coal, for example, that's an additional 20 cents per kilowatt hour in damages being done somewhere as a result of climate change.
Well, as you know, Hawaii is trying to go to green energy, to renewable energy. Been trying to do that for, I'd say, 15 years, maybe more. And it's made some progress. And we have a number of shows on ThinkTech where we try to track on that progress. Problem is that right now, you know, our economy is suffering and people are suffering, and business ventures and developments and projects, you know, get slowed down a little bit. But there is plenty of interest and plenty of momentum at every level. So if you're looking for one community where everyone knows the story, or pretty much everyone, about renewables, this would be that area. People have been educated here, hopefully. hopefully enough to make political will. If we have no more slides, I have some questions for you. Do we have more slides?
I think there's just one more we can go over quick, and it just shows that in a country like Sweden that has imposed a price on carbon, that it didn't destroy their economy, that they were able to see consistent economic growth while driving emissions down. And I think to your other point too, even though the economy is hurting right now as a result of COVID, we've got something like 15 to 20% unemployment now. So now is the time to stimulate the economy, create jobs in clean energy. So now is actually a great time to solve two in one, provide jobs and create a clean economy.
To make the transition to a renewable world, like to a sustainable world.
Yeah. Well, the question is how you change public conduct. Every time you look, there's more public. Every time you look, there are more viewpoints and frankly, more confusion. I mean, I'm talking about not necessarily Hawaii, but the country, maybe the world. People don't know. They don't know the connection between the melting of the ice caps and the change in the weather and the rise of the sea level. They don't really make the connection. They don't believe that they can affect those things, even if they do make the connection. So, really, what we need is a global effort, a global governmental effort to achieve better, clarified, rational, appropriate policy, carbon policy. So what would the policy be? If I made you guys the king and queen of the universe, and I gave you, the power to make any policy you wanted, what policy would you enact, would you proclaim tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we're probably in agreement. The carbon dividend is really good because it's a carbon neutral. It's not an additional tax. It taxes the polluters, and I think that one.
And it gives back to the people.
It gives back, right? Exactly. It gives back to the people, and it'll generate clean energy just on its own because all of a sudden the clean energy becomes more economical. That's where people will go rather than to pay the fee that they're incurring by causing pollution.
The reality, Jay, is that carbon pricing has never been on the forefront of any political party because they all play the game of winner takes it all. So they have to understand first that it has to be a bipartisan issue. It has been a few bills in there, but it never has gotten because both parties want to have it all. They want to. The Democrats want the Green New Deal, which is way too much, way too soon. And then the Republicans don't want government intervention, but at the same time, they don't do anything about it. So you have to find this bipartisan consensus when Congress and political people think about everybody.
I think also the common answer we get from politicians is if it's an important topic to the American public, then it's an important topic to them. And I think climate change is not high enough on people's list. People are either not aware or denial or don't really understand the connection. And you can see from the slides, it's actually not that scientific. If you're a taxpayer, you're paying $2,000 a year for carbon damages, and it's going up. And if you're aware of that, and you should be upset with that. And if the majority of Americans want that to be addressed as the number one issue, then policymakers will make it that their number one issue.
I totally agree. The most important question that a constituent of somebody running for office is, what is your position on climate change? What is your position on carbon policy? What is your position on making this a sustainable planet? And I don't think that question is asked often enough. It should be asked every single time. And every candidate for office should be able to answer that. And you should judge that candidate on the answer. Otherwise, we just never
the
get.
answer is education. And like you were saying, Hawaii is very highly educated on renewables, on climate change. We have to share that with every state in the United States and globally as well. At the beginning of this administration, we finally did something that all the countries agree, and it was the Paris Accord, and we had some goals there. Unfortunately, we pull out of the Paris Accord, but you have to have a global consensus, because just like social and health and economy, everything is tied up and it's gonna affect us all.
Absolutely. The other point I would ask you about is the press, the media. You know, the media can also ask candidates questions. They can ask them for their platforms on things. They can encourage policies, or at least inquire into what that candidate would adopt as a policy. Do you think the media is doing enough on this? I think you already know how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think one of the issues here is it's become so politicized. I think that the media does have some coverage, but they're afraid it's being perceived, just by mentioning the topic of climate change, as being one side of the aisle or the other. So we really need to change the perception that it's not a political question, it's a scientific reality.
Mm-hmm.
We have some meteorologists that are talking about it now, and I feel like people, they listen to the person that gives them the news every night, and we should start with the news. If it's something you talk about it every day, people are gonna pay attention to it. So to answer your question, I don't think the media is doing enough in an issue as important as climate change.
Yeah, don't be surprised. I agree with you totally. So the other thing is the schools. Now, the problem with the schools, young kids, and I have seen this myself, young kids, you know, grade schoolers and all that, if you tell them about saving the planet, if you tell them about climate change, they take the point. It's remarkable how quickly they get the message on this. The problem is they're less than 10 years old, and they're not going to be holding office for a while. They're not going to be in charge for a while. In fact, it may take decades before those kids that you teach today are in a position to do something about this. So it's a delay problem. It's time that we don't have. We don't have that time. We have to act more quickly. So what would you say, you guys, David, Thais, what would you say to the schools, to the educational system, not only you know, here in this country, but around the world, as to how to make every one of those kids in every grade take this seriously and be ready to go out and change things?
You know, Italy already have it in their curriculum, and the curriculum in elementary, middle, and high school. I think, again, the government has to make it something that has to be, how do you make it, obligatory? Like,
Right, it should be an important topic in school, because it's an important issue, and it should be part of science. I think teaching kids is extremely important, because we're going to be solving this problem for several decades. And also, kids may bring it to the attention of parents.
Right. Yes. Kids talk to their parents, and their parents get educated too.
Yes.
You know, one thing it strikes me is that we live in a time when, in COVID, everybody talks about reimagining things, reimagining our way of life, our world order, reimagining government, reimagining social justice, you know, changing it all. And if you see those people, you know, who are demonstrating, you know, over the past month or so, that's what they want. They want a better world. And I think it's really important that we fold this issue in for them. I think they will see it, but we have to keep it at a high priority for them. It's just as important as every other issue, if not more important, because it's ultimately existential. So you guys are a great team. You have created this a few years ago, and even in my limited observation of how you've done, you've expanded your reach, you've expanded your outreach, your writing, your newsletters and your articles and your research. It's really amazing. You have done really an enormous amount of outreach on this subject. I want to ask you though, and it's a private foundation, which is really a great compliment to your dedication. Where are you going with this? Right now, it's impressive, it's admirable, but where are you going? What are the next few years you expect to do in VoLo Foundation?
Well, I think that right now, VoLo, because like you said, we're reinventing ourselves and everybody's reinventing. We're going more into the media, into the ads on TV. We have PSAs, mostly creating awareness, mostly educating not only the kids, but educating the adults, mostly telling them that they have to get involved as constituents, as you say, learning about the candidates, learning what they stand for, learning, because it's too easy to blame everything also on the government when we are the ones that vote, when we are the one that ask for certain representative in our little part of where we live, and then we tell them, oh, they're not good enough. Well, you voted for him, so learn about that candidate, ask, and also get involved. Why don't you run for office, Jay?
Yeah, exactly. So David, we're almost out of time. I want to ask you to, provide us with the message you want to leave. Not only the people of Hawaii, but our talk shows go far beyond Hawaii. What would you say to people to ask them to keep aware, be more aware, adopt policies that will incentivize actions that will save us from climate change? What would you say to them? What is your message that you want to leave with them?
How would they demand of your politicians that they have a solution or a proposal to solve to decarbonize our society and therefore solve climate change? We've got to all demand that. We've got to all understand how it's hitting us both economically and our health, and that if we want our kids to enjoy what we enjoyed as a society, we need to demand our politicians address this.
Yes, and I remember the last time we did a show with you guys, Thais talked about that. She talked about your kids. She talked about how important it is to leave a world that is livable to them, and that maybe that's one of the big reasons you guys do what you do about climate change and about VoLo Foundation. It's for your kids. And I remember your comments about that last time, Thais. You want to repeat them for our viewer audience?
I always say they are my motor. They are the reason we do everything we do. And you want to preserve future generations, and you want to make them leave them an environment and a world they can live in.
You guys are great. Thank you so much, Thais Vogel, David Vogel. Thank you for coming around. I hope you enjoy your time in Hawaii, and I hope we talk again soon. And we do admire the work you're doing. Aloha.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you.